Having a hard time keeping up with everything that's happening in WoW? Well, you've come to the right place. Here's 5 things you missed in WoW, ranked from somewhat cool to truly exciting. Also, this video's infographic is available on my Patreon as always. So what better way to start an expansion than to sow discord and divide among your player base? Truly the Blizzard way. So roughly 2 days after the official launch, or 6 days post early access, Blizzard pushed through a hotfix making leveling slightly more difficult by buffing the damage and health of enemy mobs. You can see here, for example, that level 71 mobs got a whooping buff of 136% in their health and 139% in their damage. And as you can imagine, a lot of people online were not particularly happy with these changes, with many people claiming that these are a sign that Blizzard has gone back to its wicked ways. You know, perpetuating the divide between the haves and the haves-not. Ah, inequality. Truly what we want to see in our games nowadays. Now, personally, I rank these changes as the least exciting piece of WoW news because, full disclosure, I did have early access. And so far this expansion, I leveled 2 characters to max level, 2 shamans obviously, just to kind of compare and contrast how leveling felt before the change versus how it feels now with the change in place. And honestly, I didn't really feel much of a difference. Like, to the point that if I hadn't read about these changes beforehand, I would have been hard-pressed to notice that anything was different. Even after these changes, and even with garbage tier on my second shaman, the leveling mobs still felt way easier than in any past expansion. In fact, at some point, I was thinking that I was kind of playing Remix given just how easy it was to mow everything down. That said, I do have to admit that the timing of these changes was dumb. The timing of these changes was piss poor on Blizzard's side. I get it, these changes were needed, fair enough, but if you were to plot kind of the timeline of the war within so far versus when these changes were actually implemented, I would be hard pressed to think of the war's time to patch them in. Blizzard, honey, either do it immediately after the game launches when you see that a problem is in place, or wait a few more days for kind of the early access mob to calm down. Yikes. Okay, let's now move on to something a bit less controversial. Oh no, no. Twitch drops are here again, and this time you can get yourself 2 separate rewards. You can get the Ghastly Charger mount, previously a TCG exclusive I believe, by watching 4 hours of WoW stream on Twitch before September the 26th. Although, don't be an idiot like me, and make sure the streamer that you're watching has Twitch drops enabled before tuning in, because otherwise no one is going to be having a good time. And then you can get this shiny green owly boy by gifting 2 WoW subscriptions to any WoW streamer whilst they're playing WoW. So again, make sure they have drops enabled. And now to answer the question that I know you're thinking about, how do we get all these rewards without actually subjecting ourselves to a WoW streamer? If you're using Google Chrome, make sure you get the Mute tab extension, which you can use to mute the stream tab without actually muting the stream itself. This is because the progress towards the mount will not count if you watch the stream on mute, but if you mute the tab instead, then you'll be able to get the mount. Hope everyone kind of kept track with that. So who here likes PvP? Well, I have great news for you. Starting this reset, the weekly PvP quest that you can pick up in Dornogal, which, by the way, can be picked up here for those geographically inept like me. This quest will now reward 100 reputation with a random Khazalgar faction, in addition to the honor reward that you would normally get. Now, whether this is worth it or not is kinda down to the individual player, honestly. At first, my understanding was that this quest was going to reward 100 reputation with all the factions in Khazalgar, right? So with kinda Dornogal, with Assembly of the Deeps, with the spider people, etc. But I checked this, I went to get my quest and see whether this is in fact true, and it is not. This quest does not award you 100 reputation with all Khazalgar factions, it awards you 100 reputation with some particular factions only. To me personally, 100 kinda does feel on the low side, especially when it comes from PvP. But honestly, if the quest rotates to be with the severed threads, this is going to give you reputation for all 3 guys, right? So kind of the general, the vizier, and the weaver, I think, the last one, and in that case, it might be worth it. But honestly, I think this quest is only worth doing if you're planning on PvPing. Anyway, you know, Logdar and all that. Next up, the trading post is once again back in town, and this time it's all very piratey themed, bringing back some unpleasant memories. The standout items this time, I would say, are definitely the 2 Crocolisk mounts that you can get for 600 tender and for filling the bar respectively, as well as Claudius? Is that this guy's name? Claudius the Crab, which you can snatch for 330 tenders. And also this yellow-themed Plunderstorm recolor set. That's pretty Yas Girl Slay Queen, I would say. Personally, for whatever reason, I'm really into this simple camo transmog because it just screams to me, please leave me alone. No, I don't want to come to your house party. And honestly, that's the kind of energy I want to project right now. Finally, a quick tip for those of you not in the know. You no longer have to go to Stormwind or Orgrimmar for the trading post. There's one right here in Oribos. Oribos? Where the fuck did that come from? I mean, right here in Dornogal. This is definitely not the most exciting trading post in recent memory, I would say, but for someone with a bit of an addiction like me, any +1 is always welcome. Finally, we arrive at the top of the list, the creme de la creme, as they say. So here's the thing about resonance crystals. Kind of like in Dragonflight with the war resources or whatever, you're going to need a shit ton of these to purchase everything that's on offer. And these crystals are especially important now in the beginning of the expansion, as they are required to buy upgradable veteran level gear from the different renown vendors. And while there are a few ways to farm these crystals out there, the Hollowfall Spreading the Light quests come to mind, for example. I so far never really found a way to kind of grind this in a satisfying manner. Well, that all changes today. Turns out the different the different skyriding races across Kazalgar will reward you with 95 resonance crystals for every difficulty that you get gold on. Let's do some quick maths here. That's 4 zones, 6 races per zone, 3 difficulties per race. That's I really should have stayed in school. Anyway, you can earn a whooping 6,840 resonance crystals from doing all of these races, and the best part is that you can do all of these races on each alt you have. So that's 6,840 crystals for each alt. Damn a lot of crystals, bro. Damn a lot of crystals. Also, an important thing to note here, the Skyriding World Quest doesn't actually have to be active. I linked in the description an article with kind of all the coordinates of the different races. You can do these at any point, right? You don't really have to wait for the world quest. And I don't know, man, I grew up playing Spyro as a kid, and there's just something inherently satisfying about having rings in the sky that you get to fly through. It just does something to my simple little brain. So for this Q&A part of the video, there are 3 questions I want to address. The first one is, what do you like about the War Within so far? So I did a lot of thinking about this question. In fact, I'm thinking about making a video kind of with the wins and the fails of the War Within so far. But honestly, the one thing I liked about the War Within is that it takes everything that Dragonflight did well and just does it better somehow. So for example, one of my biggest problems with Dragonflight were the various world events, you know, stuff like Super Bloom, the Storm, all that stuff. At some point it just became a little bit samey, right? Like, how many times can you participate in the community soup before you get a bit tired? And don't get me wrong, there are stuff like that in War Within as well. I am not the biggest fan of kind of that whole theater troupe event going on in Dornogal. I think that's just kind of boring, for lack of a better word. But what I really like is the diversity in the world events that we actually have. Because yes, you have that theater troupe, which is kind of like the community soup from Dragonflight, but Awakening the Machine, for example, is a totally different thing. It teleports you in this instance where you get to defend this guy. It's kind of like a bit of a tower defense element to it. Then you just have world quests kind of in the Arathi area, and yes, ultimately, these are still kind of world events. They still boil down to filling the bar or whatever, but I like that they feel different. I like that each zone kind of has its identity, not only visually, not only in the characters and the spirit, but the world events themselves have a game mechanics identity as well, right? Because in Dragonflight, yeah, we had the soup, yeah, we had the siege of whatever, yeah, we had the hunts, but they were all soup. basically, if you know what I mean. Moving on, the second question asks, what should you focus on in these weeks to come? And this really kind of depends on everyone's objectives, right? So I am a mount collector myself, so I'm going to focus on the different mount farms, also getting ready for Mythic Plus and things like that. I would say definitely prioritize renown if you can, because, you know, you want to build renown both for the fact that these factions are going to sell you valuable cosmetics, such as mount pets, etc., but also because you can buy veteran gear, which is going to be quite useful once the season launches next week, 1 week from now. I don't know, you know the timeline. The second thing I would say to prioritize is, if you haven't done already, make sure you finish the campaign, because the new weekly quest that is awarded in Dornagal, that's going to give you kind of a whole bunch of things, requires you to have progressed with the campaign a bit further. I was like, bro, I'm done leveling, I'm done with the campaign. Well, surprise, surprise, no you're not. You still need to do some quests with Thrall or whatever in order to access the archives where you can do the weekly quest. And finally, did you get any mounts so far? Well, yes, I did. The one I'm most happy with, that it's out of the way, is the regurgitated mole that drops from the lurker rare in the Ringing Deeps, right? So the one where you have to pull the levers. I got that like on the first or second attempt or whatever, so I'm glad I never have to do that again. Well, that was that. Thank you so much for watching the video. Hope you found this useful. Let me know down below what questions you have. Let me know what you think of this format. You can see I'm testing something new, kind of making these recap videos. I want to kind of start a series. The infographic itself is going to be available as always on my Patreon for absolute free. Any contribution would help this channel and these infographics out tremendously, but the infographic itself is available for absolute free. I must go now. My people need me. Summit!